So now let's look at how to add a rule. So I'm on the AWS config dashboard, and you can go to rules and then click on add rule over here. So you can select this pre-built rule. You can add your own custom rule, like you can create your own Lambda that follows the structure of a AWS config rule. You can also use third-party rules, and also if you go to AWS Labs on GitHub and then go to AWS config rules project, there are a lot of rules available over here. And then so basically you can utilize these rules, or you can import third-party rules. So in this scenario, what I'm going to do is select this inbuilt rule called restrict SSH. So what it does is it checks for your SSH ports on your security groups and see if it's open to the world or not. So when I click on that, it will create this rule page where you have to supply the name of your rule, description, and it's the managed rule name, and the trigger type. So this is important to know over here. This trigger type, it's selected as configuration changes by default, but the other option is periodic, meaning that AWS config will evaluate this rule as soon as there are changes on the resources. In periodic, you can select like hourly or every 2 hours. So the rules will be evaluated every hour or every 2 hours, but not as soon as the resource changes or configuration changes. So in this case, it's enabled by default. So this is the trigger type, and the other option is periodic. And the scope of changes, do you want to check the tags changes or resources changes? So we are going to track the resources change over here, and the resource over here is EC2 security group. So now let's click on save. So now you can see over here in the compliance section that it's evaluating the rules. It's going through the security groups and checking if SSH is restricted or not. And it will, once its evaluation is done, we'll see what happens. So now after a while, you see over here in the compliance section, it says 6 non-compliant resources. So I'm going to click on the rule, and then over here you'll see which resources are non-compliant and which resources are compliant. So which security groups has SSH open and which security groups do not have SSH open. So I'm going to go to this resource over here, and so we have SSH over here. I'm going to just remove SSH from this rule. Then I'm going to go back to config rules. So now it says it still says this rule, this security group is non-compliant. I'm going to click on reevaluate, and it says the evaluation may take few minutes. So we're going to join after a few minutes and see what happens to this security group which was non-compliant. So after a while, you see now we have 5 non-compliant resources. Earlier we had 6. So if we go back to that security group, it's now showing us as compliant. So this is how you can apply a rule, and you can also create your custom rules or use third-party rules and then evaluate your resources. So now let's look at another thing. If I go to resources and click on instance and then look up, and let's look up this instance. And if you click on view details over here, you get the JSON representation of what AWS config is recording for you. So that's your entire JSON. And if you want to create snapshot of your resources or snapshot of what AWS config is storing into an S3 bucket, you can create a snapshot as well. So to create a snapshot, you'll have to go to your command line. So I'm going to go to my CLI. So now I'm in my CLI and I'm going to run this command. So for this AWS config service, we are going to run this command deliver config snapshot and in this region. So it will create the snapshot in an S3 bucket. So let's run this. And I misspelled the delivery channel name, which is default. So here is our snapshot ID. So now I'm going to go to S3 and see if the snapshot was created. So over here you can see we have this config snapshot and we can download this file and then we're going to open this file. It was just created. So it's a GZ file, but you will be able to open it. I think I'm going to have to just download it. So now I'm going to open this file. And you have the JSON over here. I'm going to use the pretty JSON. So this online. So this I just went to this online website. You can prettify a JSON in a text editor as well. So you can see over here the snapshot of your entire configuration, AWS config, what AWS config is recording. So this is how you create snapshots for AWS config. And another command you can run to describe your config rule compliance is AWS config service describe compliance by config rule. So if you don't provide the parameter to this command, like it will show all the rules. So over here we know our restrict SSH rule has 5 non-compliant resources. So in that way you can also filter it by your config rule name as well. So the command is describe compliance by config rule. To view the rules, also you can view this from the console. So these are some of the commands that may be handy for you while you are using AWS config.